In this video, you're going to learn another ES6 data type. It's called a symbol. So first, let's understand why you would need to use a symbol. So I'm going to create an object and call it car. So first we are trying to understand why do you need symbols for. So our object is going to have a few properties and methods. So let's have a make Audi, for example. Let's have another property feature. So for example, cruise control. And let's make things more interesting by using computed properties. So instead of feature like that, I'm going to create a constant feature1 and call it feature. And then we're going to use the computed property like this. All right. So on purpose, I'm going to create another feature. And I'm going to use a computed property of feature2, and I'm going to define feature2 right there. And intentionally, I'm going to use the same value for both features. All right, so this one, let's say, is going to be air conditioning. And then let's have a state. So this will tell us whether the car is on or off. So normally, in big projects, you will have states stored inside constants. So let's create a constant off state and set it to off, and another one on state and set it to on. So this is how this is done normally in big projects for consistency. So the state initially is going to be on state. So in your code, when you define those constants, you do that to use them later on like this. All right. Okay, so now let's say that the developer didn't follow the rule and the code is not as consistent as you wished it would be. So they used on like that and they didn't use the constant. So let's carry on. I'm going to have another one, speed 20. Let's have a method turn on, which will turn the car on. So we're just setting the state to on. And again, let's say that instead of using on state, as the developer is supposed to do, let's say that they didn't do that and they set that to on like this, literally. Also, let's have a turn off method, which sets the state to off state. So again, the developer didn't follow the rule and they used off like this. Let's have an accelerate method, which checks if the state is on, like that. Again, let's suppose they used on like this. And then if the state is on, the speed goes up by 10. Okay, so this is how the developer created the car object. Well, there are many inconsistencies here because they were supposed to use the constants, but for some reason they didn't. Now, to start, let's log car. So you can see the make, we can see the air conditioning feature, but we don't see the cruise control feature, although we had two features. Now the problem is that feature 1 and feature 2, they both set to feature. using a string like this. So basically, these two variables, they store the same value. So when you define these properties, at the end, you're going to end up with only one property. So these two properties, they are not unique. So we need to find a way to make them unique. And that's why ES6 comes with symbols. All right. Now, we're not going to talk about symbols yet. We're going to carry on. So you can now say that you know that symbols are going to help us create unique values. All right. And we're going to come back to that in a bit. So I'm going to write a comment here. So only one feature is listed. All right. And this can be solved by making the object's keys unique. We'll do that later. Now let's try car.accelerate and then log the car again and see what we get. So now the speed increased by 30. All right. All right. So now we've got this issue with the properties which are not unique. And also we've got that issue with the programmer or the developer using strings like that instead of making the code consistent and using the constants. So to solve this, we're going to need to use ES6 symbols. So let's understand what a symbol means. So symbols are new in ES6 and they are a primitive type. So just like a string, a symbol is a new type. And you create them using a factory function, which is called symbol. So I'm going to create a variable mySymbol using the symbol function. So this is a factory function which creates symbols. So if you do that and you log your symbol, this is what you get. Now you can also add a description to the symbol. This is not going to change the symbol, but it will just add a description to it. So if you're doing debugging or anything like that, then you will find the description of your symbol. So that parameter is optional. All right, so this is a symbol. You can convert it to a string if you like. And that's a string, but you can't coerce it to a string. So if you write something like mySymbol plus hello, you will get an error. So that's not possible, but you can convert it to a string like that. So a symbol is unique. So the value that you create is going to be unique. So what does it mean? So this means that if you create a symbol, call it 1 using the symbol function, and let's give it a description A, for example, and you create another one, symbol 2, and you give it the same description. If you try symbol 1 equals symbol 2, you will get false. And that's because whenever you call the symbol factory, you are creating a new unique value. So this is going to return false. And that's the whole intention or purpose of using symbols in ES6, is to have unique values. Now, if you check the type of these values, you will get symbol, because as we said, symbol is a new primitive type. So it's not an object or anything else, it's a symbol, just like a string or a number and so on. It's a symbol. Alright, so now let's go back to our objects and fix things using symbols. So let's start with the feature, cruise control and air conditioning. So when we logged our objects, we had only one feature, and that's because these two had the same value, which is feature, a string. So instead of using a string, we're going to use a symbol. So symbol like that, and you can give it a description feature. And the same thing will happen with the second one, like this. So now if we log our object, let's see what we get. So we've got the first feature, symbol feature, and another feature, symbol feature. So both features, now they show up. Well, before we had only one showing up. So we fixed the issue by making the object property keys, or the objects keys or objects properties, we made them unique. So they all have unique values. Now let's move to the next problem. So the developer used strings like that instead of using the constants which we defined at the beginning of our project, and this is against the code consistency. So to make the code consistent, we're going to make sure that the developer uses these values, right? So instead of using of as a string, we're going to have a symbol, and give it a description of, and the same thing applies to on. Okay, so now we cannot use strings for the state, for example, because we're using symbols here in our project logic. Okay, so if you write something like this, this is incorrect. So now the developer, if the developer writes that, is going to be incorrect, because this time it's not going to be only a syntax issue and the code is still working. No, but this time it's going to be a problem because the state is not of type string. It should be a symbol. So we need to fix that now and use the on state. Now, if the developer writes symbol on like that, this is going to be a problem, because that symbol on and that symbol on, they are not the same, because every time you call symbol, you are creating a unique value. So you really need to use the on state variable. And the same thing applies there and there. And there as well. Okay, so again, this is a good example showing how symbols can be used in ES6. You can use them to create unique values, values that you cannot mix up with other values, like here, the off state. Before using the symbol, you could write off as a string and things will still be working. Well, now if you write off as a string, you are not using the correct value, because the correct value should be a symbol. Also, we use symbols to create unique property keys, like here. All right. So this is a really good example, and hopefully you managed to understand the concepts of this new data type, or this new primitive type in ES6 through these examples. All right, now a quick comment about symbols. If you try the keys method of the object's object, you will not see symbols in there. And the same thing applies if you try get own property names, and you can't see symbols there. The same thing will happen if you use a for in loop. So for example, for const x in car log x, you get everything but not symbols. So instead of x, you can use key, and this is what you get. Now if you want to see symbols, you need to use the own property symbols method of the object's object. All right, so this time you will get the symbols. So it's get own property symbols like that. So you can see only the symbols or the keys where you use symbols inside your object. And this applies to these two. All right. Okay, so in the next video, you're going to learn symbol.iterator.